so you just finished watching me take PrepTest 65, Logical Reasoning Section 1, which happened to be Section 1 of the test as well. And you'll see that I ended up completing it in just under 18.5 minutes of the 35 allotted. So some disclaimers before we go forward. I'd never actually seen any of those questions. And I did my best to do it under test conditions, meaning complete silence. There was nothing on my table that was banned. So there's no cups, there's no water, there's no snacks, nothing like that. I did use a pen instead of a pencil. I probably should have actually just used a pencil, but that's neither here nor there. And so what I want to do now is I want to go over a couple of the takeaways that you could get from watching somebody do a section. I mean, I know it's kind of boring otherwise to just watch somebody circle some answers. Okay, so the first thing is you'll notice that I never rushed through a question. What I mean by that is that there were several instances, I would say easily half the section, where the first time through the stimulus I did not understand what was going on. So rather than plow forward and start looking at answer choices, I went back and I read them again. And sometimes I would go back and read them a third time. And you'll see that there are long pauses between my first initial stab at reading the stimulus and when I actually go to the answer choices. The reason for that is because you have to know what they want out of you and what they are giving you if you have any shot at answering a question correctly. And so I make sure that I know what's going on before I go to the answer choice, before I even think about going to the answer choices. That must be the thing. That must be the way that you think about this test. The next thing is that you'll notice that most of my answers came from what I like to call the top down, meaning that I read the stimulus and I did a little thinking, and then I sort of knew what to look for before going to the answers, and then from there it was a very, very quick exercise to circle the one that was correct. And you contrast that to the process of elimination. I went back and counted. I ended up using process of elimination on 11 questions out of the 25. And a good 9 or 10 of them were purely to make sure that the answer choice that I selected was correct. In other words, I went back after I had gotten an answer from the top down, and then I eliminated to make sure that it was correct. And that brings up an important point, because this is sort of where you want to be by the time test day rolls around. We teach process of elimination, and we make a big show of going through all of the answer choices to make sure you have the right answer. But the bottom line is you don't have time for that on test day, and so you have to get used to just looking for what you know to be the correct answer. And so I only use process of elimination when I, just to make sure that my answer is 100% correct, and only on the questions that I'm not 100% sure of to begin with. There was one question that I used the process of elimination. I believe it was question number 20, where I eliminated down to C, and then I approached it from the other direction, where I was like, okay, is this one correct? And then you'll see me do the map and then say, okay, I've proved it to myself that this one's correct. So that's that. The next thing is that you'll notice that there was the occasional premise conclusion breakdown, there was the occasional map, but for the most part my sheets were pretty blank. And the reason for that is, again, by the time test day rolls around, we make a big show of doing all these things in our videos, but the bottom line is it has to happen in your head, because you just don't have time to write it all out. And so you see that in action in this section. So a couple of specific questions sort of round out the takeaway. So question 17. I was down to 2 answer choices, and I waffled for a long time between the two. And then it turns out all I did was miss a word in the answer choice. And so I actually went back to read the stimulus again, and then I read answer choice A, and then at that point it just made no sense to me. And so it does happen to everyone that you just miss words in answer choices that materially affect what's going on. Well, that's fine, but the idea or the point is that you have to recognize that you do that and make sure that you go back and correct any such mistakes. Question 18, I got stuck. That was the only question in this section that I got stuck on the first time around, and so I spent about a minute looking at it, and then rather than waste any more time, I said forget it. I'm just going to go on to a couple more questions. So I answered questions 19, 20, 21, and then I went back to question 18. The reason that's important is because it's a good idea to leave a little bit of space between when you skip a question when you come back to it, just so that your brain has a chance to sort of refresh what it knows when it looks at it again. Otherwise, all of your old thought processes continue to sort of stay in your short-term memory, and it just doesn't help to skip questions at that point. And finally, on questions 18 and 20 both, you'll notice that when I went back and I did them, I ended up having to underline that they were necessary assumptions. And the reason for that is that I was treating them slightly differently from the way I should have. In other words, I was not 100% clear about what they wanted out of me, and so I had to go back and make sure I understood. I told myself explicitly, look, they want a necessary assumption out of me, so that is what I have to provide them. And occasionally that will happen. When you lose focus, you'll notice that that was late in the section. You start to lose focus a little bit as you get toward the end, which is fine, which is normal. But then, rather than letting it affect your test performance, you just have to refocus. You have to just do whatever it takes to remind yourself that this is what they're looking for. And so for me, it was to underline the words requires the assumption in both of those questions, in order to make it absolutely clear to myself that this is what they want. Okay, so those are the takeaways from sort of what I recorded. The idea is that this is how your ideal LSAT LR section would look, or maybe not ideal, but pretty close to an ideal LR section, where you get through a bunch of the questions and you have a ton of time at the end to go back and check for mistakes. And so I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them in the comments, and I'll do my best to get back to you.